Alright everyone, welcome back to Dominions 5. We're going to be doing a nation analysis on Middle Age Relay, the Fallen Star. I've been teasing this video for a while. It's just been a hard time getting the time to actually do it. Not only are we in holidays down here, but those of you who watch the news may have noticed that my country is on fire. And so there's certainly a lot to do around here just to make sure properties are protected, friends are looked after, and to respond to the disaster and support people where you can. So all that's happening at the moment. But I've got a moment and I'm like, no, I'm going to put out this video. And the reason I'm going to put out this video is because the game on General Confusion's channel where I'm playing Middle Age Relay is progressing relatively well. We should have introductory videos on that one soon. So I needed to go over the nation first and not repeat myself during those videos, because I produced them assuming that this guide would already have been done. So, I'm aware before I get started that other guides exist for Middle Age Relay. Some of my advice, I assume, will be relatively similar to that others have given. For others, I may disagree on some points, so ultimately I'd encourage you all to go test this nation yourself. But I'm going to follow the usual principle. I'm going to provide a very, very quick summary of what I think of the nation. I'm then going to go over its lore, its units, its mages, do some analysis on those, and then suggest playstyle and options and opportunities that may flow from Relay. So, if you need a one-line summary, the TLDR of this video is that Relay is a flexible, powerful, middle-aged nation with relatively few weaknesses, which is hard to eliminate unless there is a strong water nation in the game that is willing to rush them. If there is a strong water nation in the game willing to rush them, then they're in more of a world of hurt, but they are capable of fighting an underwater battle, just probably not effectively one-on-one against Pelagia. So, if you're going to play Middle Age Relay, the best of the relays, look at who else is in your game before you optimize and design your build. Let's talk who Relay is and then go through the units. So, in the early age, Relay is a underwater, very ultra deep sea kingdom of Aboleths, the Mine Lords. And the idea in the early age is basically they control the deepest parts of the sea, the Atlanteans control the middle and are expanding, and then the combination of Oceania and Pelagia control the richest and most valuable parts of the sea, which are the coastal areas of the sea, the trading lanes, and areas like that. Atlantis is doing really well and kicking people around, and the Aboleths are rising from the deep, if you take some of that lore on board. And then this, from a distant star inhabited by a great race of alien beings, was struck with an unimaginable catastrophe. So these guys, the Illithids, are on their planet. Something goes terrible. They launch themselves through the void, which isn't just space, it seems. It's like time-space. And they crash their civilization down on some magically watered meteor and smack straight into the ocean, and they land right on top of Atlantis, and they crush and destroy the basalt city in a near extinction level event for everyone nearby, and severely disrupt and distort the entire underwater environment. So they land, they've shattered the power of the Aboleths, and they take over. They take over much of the former territory of the Aboleths. They build Relay, the sunken city. And the Starspawn, who are these Illithid creatures, basically take over and run a new slave kingdom. So, yeah, they're weird. They're Lovecraftian monsters. They're Illithids, so they're mind flayers, essentially, combined with some of the Dominion's lore from the early age Relay, where Illithids have taken over and supplanted the Mine Lords and are now setting out to rule the world, essentially, because that's what everyone does in Dominions. They try and rule the world and elevate their god, the Chosen One. What sort of military does Relay have in order to accomplish the humble goal of elevating their leader to godhood? So, units first. Relay has, I would say, three sorts of troops. Let's go, three classes of troops in terms of strategy, but a variety of actual units. The units they have are largely familiar to those of you who know early age Relay, but let's go through them really quickly and cover their importance. The Lobo Guard is an important unit. It's a 5 gold, 1 resource, 2 recruitment point, 50 morale unit with 13 hit points. This is a meat shield. It is a cheap meat shield. It has a range 0, 12 damage claw attack, and it has pretty bad skills, attack 9, defense 7. So it's not going to kill anything, it's not going to hit anything, it's going to get hit. It has protection too, so it's a naked Atlantean with its mind broken. It's not even particularly fast, and it has woeful magic resistance, 5 magic resistance. So anything that's MR check or die, blang. Shadow Blast will absolutely blat these dudes like there is no tomorrow. However, they only cost 5 gold, 1 resource, 2 recruitment points, and they have 13 hit points, and they have 50 morale and will never break. So, and they're slaves, which means that the upkeep cost is 2 per year. These guys are up there with Hatun Runa. In fact, they're equal to Hatun Runa in terms of upkeep, but they trade being less useful than Hatun Runa in that they're not flyers and they're less capable for 50 morale. And they're amphibians. So, the Lobo Guard is one of the best meat shield HP blob units in the game. If you just want to buy hit points to suck up evocations, to get in the enemy's way, or just to buy a bunch of siege strength really quickly, all those things, a Lobo Guard is a really good unit. Combined with the fact that they have dark vision 100%, actually a decent, they'll survive longer in dark environments, and deep seas are often dark. So the Lobo Guard is one of your really important units. Then you have the slave troop lineup, which is familiar. So these come in a couple of varieties, namely Atlantean, Merman, and Triton. Merman being the single tails, Tritons being the double tail. Of these, the basic trade-offs is you usually get a naked version and an armored version. So the naked version, the Atlantean, for example, and these are all slaves. 9 gold, 2 resources, 6 recruitment points. You get a hard-hitting spear at average stats, but you get 0 protection, cheap upkeep, dark vision 100. So Atlanteans give you decent strength, amphibiousness, and they hit hard, I suppose, but they're relatively slow. Mermen hit are much weaker. They have fewer hit points, even less protection. Sorry, is this the Merman or the Triton? I think that's the Merman. Is that the Merman? Yeah. The amphibians. So they're even shitter than the Atlanteans, but they're much faster underwater, and they're still amphibious. And the unarmored ones have the nets. The armored ones have, a little bit of protection, but they lose the net and they only do 12 damage with the spear. So I've never seen anyone actually use Merman troops in anything that I've watched or anything I've played against. I just don't think many people use the Merman. If you're going to be fighting underwater, you can use Tritons. Tritons hit moderately hard, are very fast underwater, have even more hit points than the Atlanteans, and actually have decent skills. So the armored Tritons with 11 protection, 11-10, only costing 9 gold, being slaves, 19 combat speed, hitting 20 damage with the Bone Trident, is actually really quite a good underwater combat troop for the cost. And the resource cost is still very low. So if you're in an amphibious war, Slave Guardians may actually make an appearance, especially if you need something that hits hard. They're not great, but they're good troops. The problem is they are aquatic, so recruit them only if you know you're going to be fighting underwater. Then there's a special... I should say for the Atlanteans, there's a third option. You can get one with a hat, or you can get one without a hat if you want to save 1 resource. Buy the hat. Then there's one extra troop. And I'm going to mention him now, before we go over the others, and indicate that this troop is one of the things that sets Middle Age Relay apart from Early Age Relay, and is one of the reasons that you may influence your scales in a way Early Age Relay never would. The Meteorite Guard costs 13 gold, but is a slave, so still has the half upkeep. Has 12 morale, unlike all the other slave troops that have shitty morale. Meteorite Guards have good morale. Meteorite Guards have good magic resistance. 13 MR is good. Meteorite Guards have 19 protection and do 22 damage with a magical weapon at length 3. Meteorite Guards are really good troops. Meteorite Guards are competitive with the Ice Guards of MA Atlantis, who they are less armoured than, but don't suffer in heat scales. They are competitive with Ulmish infantry. They're less armoured than the Black Plates, but they hit really hard and they're generally pretty good. The 33 resource cost, however, is very steep. They are also very slow in terms of map moves, so you ain't going anywhere fast with Atlanteans. That's just a theme with Atlanteans in general. You're not going anywhere fast with them. So, the Meteorite Guardsman gives you the option of having a hard-hitting, stern, determined infantry line. The problem is you need 33 resources per unit. So you're going to have to decide, and we'll talk about, when we talk about strategy, you need to basically decide, are you going to build a squishy, no resource army and go sloth 3, or are you going to go production 3 and build a meteorite guard army? If you're building a sloth army, then the Shambler Thrall is an option for expansion. The Shambler Thrall costs 20 gold, 1 resource, 22 recruitment points. The recruitment points are obviously the gate here. They move relatively quickly on the map. They have 7 protection because they're hard skin, and they're tramplers. They're size 3 tramplers that rely on their 24 hit points and 7 prot to keep them alive just long enough that they can trample indies. So these are lobotomized shamblers that go around and just crush people into the dirt. You can expand with shamblers, but you take significant attrition expanding with shamblers. Nonetheless, as early age relay, that's what I rely on, and if you're sloth relay, they're useful. Crab hybrids are a skip from me. Crab hybrids have... The attraction of the crab hybrid is meant to be that you get a decent protection unit with 2 attacks at size 3, so high damage and moderate protection without having resources. So even if you go sloth, you can still get a moderate protection unit rather than leaning on the meteorite guard. But they cost a lot of recruitment points, and most importantly, they're aquatic. And I don't like the idea of hiring units during the expansion phase that are then going to be useless. That said, these guys will carve up illithids, they'll carve up mermen, they'll carve up they'll carve up shamblers pretty reliably. They're not bad. They're not my preference, but they're not bad. I don't recruit them, however, because they're stuck in the water. And they're not slaves, and because they're not slaves, it means they have really good morale, but you're paying upkeep for them. Who wants to pay upkeep? Then you have 2 classes of Mind Blasters and Coastal Troops. The Mind Blasters are strictly superior in some ways, but with one catch to the early age relay Mind Blaster. So the Illithids are Mind Blasters. They're actually really good units all around, actually. They have relatively good hit points, so 28 hit points. They're size 4s, so they can't be easily trampled, although most people don't like size 4 giants for a reason. You only get 1 per square, so they're terrible. If you get into close combat, they suffer. They only have 5 protection, but they have good magic resistance, morale. They don't really want to be there, I guess. And they give you a Mind Blast, and in close combat, they give you a Life Drain. They are Spirit Sight, so you can't fool them with Darkness. It doesn't really matter because they've got this Precision 100 Mind Blast anyway, and that Mind Blast has 10 ammunition. So Mind Blast applies damage straight to the head, doesn't add strength. Really good. Really good. Because it also has that paralyze effect as well as doing damage. And paralyzing your enemies allows your troops to walk up to the paralyzed foes and stab them. Stab them while they have 0 defense and kill them. So they are a force multiplier. They also have this blunt resist, but that's usually not going to be relevant because you don't want people in close combat with illithids. If you do think they're getting into close combat and you have heaps of resources, you can pay 51 resources for no difference in gold or recruitment points to put them in 17 armor and give them this 25 damage meteorite trident instead of their life drain. I wouldn't, because the role of the illithids is to be mind blasters, not to be frontline troops, and if you have those extra resources, you should instead be hiring meteorite guards and using them in your front line or as bodyguarding for your illithids. There might be niche cases where this is useful in the late game. Maybe you have riches for beneath and you have more resources than you know what to do with, but still I wouldn't. On the coast, you have 2 classes of hybrids, so these are humans influenced by the human Atlantean crosses. The key limiter here is it's a meh infantry unit, but it has 2 attacks for 12 gold, but it costs a bunch of recruitment points. So you get the Spear Tentacle one, Tentacle being armor piercing, but still bleh, because it's only 7 damage. Or you can get Spear Tentacle with 8 protection for 6 resources. Here, recruitment point gating is a problem. Reality is, this unit's just going to get... It's useful if you're playing squishy relay, so sloth relay, and you might want numbers on land and you want double attack units. But it's not necessarily, they're not great. They're not great. Their direct competition in Sloth Relay is for the same sort of price line, getting this 18 damage Bone Trident on a Slave Guardian, who is a slave. Trade-off of whether you want a slave or not, I guess. 11 morale, non-slaves. But you get a lot more. You get more protection down here. If you're playing Production Relay, Meteorite Guard is your unit. What's the big takeaway now that I've gone through them? So you can make 2 sorts of Relayan armies. You can get Squishy Relay, which is a bunch of squishy troops. Maybe they're Shambler Thralls, maybe they're Slave Troopers. Slave Troopers hit really hard with these Tridents, which can be good. and you stick them in front of a bunch of illithids. The illithids mind blast and paralyze your opponents, and then your useless troops walk up to them and stab them, because even slaves can manage the task of stabbing someone while they are paralyzed and incapable of moving. Or you can play a meteorite guard relay, where you're actually relying on a heavily armored front line. And you can still support it with a few illithids if you want, but the strength at this point is in like the high quality frontline infantry troop, who grind forward slowly at combat speed 5, but can take anything that's thrown at them because they don't have a magic resistance weakness, they don't have a protection weakness, they have high morale, and they hit super hard with magic weapons. They will kill things. And you build a tough Ulm style army out of meteorite guardsmen. That's your troop lineup. I would say pick one or the other and decide. Remember, there's a 6 scale difference between whether you want to play Squishy Relay and Meteorite Guard Relay. But when we talk about strategy, you'll realise there's some attraction to Meteorite Guard Relay. Commander lineup. The commander lineup is good here. So let's go through the good and then yes, the bad and the ugly. The average is you have a scout. Haha. He's an amphibious scout for 25 gold. Handy. Some nations don't have them. You want them. Trader Prince. This is a relatively useless commander. He's mostly useless because he costs 50 resources, has 80 leadership, but does not have Taskmaster, and has no magic leadership. And all of the Thrall units and the Illithids are all magical beings. So the only thing he can lead are your Meteorite Guard. I wouldn't. Like most of the time. This is a really hard-hitting unit, I guess, but I wouldn't. The Illithid Lord is, for the same gold and just a few more resources, a more balanced leader option, in that you lose the leadership bonus because you no longer have 80 leadership, you only have 40, so you don't get the, what is it? +1? Yeah, you don't get the +1 leadership, but you're able to lead magic beings, so you can have a mixed normal and magical leadership. You can't have line formation, unfortunately, but you do get Taskmaster 2, so you're going to whip those slaves into motion and actually have better morale in your slaves than you would on a slave prince, but you can't have line formation. And, as well as being able to lead magical beings and having more hit points and still being decently protected, you get a free Mind Blast out of it. And you're paying 50 gold for an ordinary Mind Blaster, paying 80 for a commander who can Mind Blast, not necessarily a bad thing. So you might be leading some of your forces with Illithid Lords. Early game, however, you're going to be very resource limited, and you may end up doing what I do sometimes and end up leading forces with slave mages, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Slave Priest is just a priest, it's a slave, so it's super cheap to maintain, it's a holy one, sacred. Can't really do much with these guys. At least they're amphibious. The Star Child. Star Child is one of the things that makes Relay obnoxious to play against. Super obnoxious, and I love it. Well, I love it now that I'm playing the nation. I hated it up till this point. I wasn't going to play this nation. Like always, I selected my nations by dice rolls, so I wouldn't normally just pick a nation this cancerous. The Star Child is a recruitable fort mage. They are not sacred, but they're only 2 recruitment points. They're only 85 gold. They do 7 research points, so with high magic scales at 85 gold, they're actually they're a decently efficient researcher. They come out of the box as Astral 1, and they have no random, so you're not paying a premium for cross paths, which means that they're viable communion slaves if you don't mind exploding their heads. And they have a Mind Blast and a dagger, but notably they are assassins. They are spirit-style stealthy assassins. Why is this important? Well, Star Child can go into an assassinate set to fire, and they'll Mind Blast the enemy commander, which has a decent shot at paralyzing a lot of enemies. You combine this with the Star Child's ability to hold any sort of item which brings a retinue, whether that's skeletons, vine men. The classic is the water bottle, so they bring a water elemental with them. And if the enemy is casting spells, or if the enemy is just anyone, I guess, that Mind Blast stands a good chance of paralysing the foes so that their little summon guys can walk up and stab the enemy. This makes them quite efficient assassins with gear, 485 gold. And because they're good researchers, you can hire a bunch of them, stick them in your forts, and if your forts ever come under attack, well, they're excellent defensively in that scenario, because you have a whole bunch of assassins handy who can assassinate all the enemy commanders and Mind Blast and make their life hell. And when they're not doing that, they can be researching. So I love the Star Child. I think it's great. The only thing that would make it better is if it was also a spy, because if it was also a spy, you could go get everyone's scales, and that would be just great. So Star Child, great unit. However, don't overlook your next mage. The Slave Mage is probably the primary mage of all three relays, and the Middle Age is no different. They're 175 gold, but they are slaves, which halves their upkeep. They have leadership 10 as a result of being slaves. They can lead 10 ordinary units and 20 magic units, and they can be recruited in one turn for a fort. So, because they cost no resources, only in gold, I actually use these guys to lead expansion units at the start of the game because they can pack illithids and some thralls with maybe 10 standard slave troops and actually be a sort of viable expansion party. They give you Water 2, Astral 1, and then they random Water, Earth, Astral, Nature. This notably gives you Nature in your communions, Earth in your communions, heavy Water communions, and better slaves. The Water 3 ones are useful because they are your primary underwater combatant in the early game because the Water 3s are out-of-the-box greater elemental summoners. This does not make you competitive with Pelagia. However, it does give you something to lean on. And of course, they're amphibious. Now, Slave Mage is 13 and 13 research, and Slaves means at Magic 3, you're getting 16 research for the upkeep that you would normally pay on a 90 gold mage. They are very good researchers, and that's what you will use them for. However, you won't recruit huge numbers of them for research until probably about the end of year 0. Then you can start winding it up. You really need extra forts to recruit them because they're competing with your other competition. You might think, oh, shitty mermen. Surely they'll be supplanted by the illithids. And the answer is nah, not really. The first star spawn is a Holy 2, not a Holy 3, because recruitable Holy 3s make nations better and Relay doesn't need the help. This 13-year-old chap hasn't learnt much in his almost 1.5 millennia of existence, because for 200 gold, you get an Astral 1 with 1 random from Water, Earth, Astral, Death. This notably, however, is a way to get small amounts of death into communions, and he's the only illithid mage that you can recruit in any fort, as opposed to being cap only. He also serves the important duty of being a summoner. The summoner is someone who has more chance of going into the Void Gate, and we'll talk about the Void Gate. Let's talk about the Void Gate now. So the Void Gate lets you send in a mage, preferably with the summoning skill, but not necessarily with it, and you have a chance, based on your summoning skill, to make things come out of it, void creatures come out of it, who then work for you. It can also eat your mages. And spoiler alert, in the game I'm currently playing, the first thing that it did to the first mage I sent in was it ate them. So this is risky, considering you're sending 200 gold mages in. However, you can also summon some quite useful creatures that may be useful from time to time, and every time you're successful, your summoning skill goes up. So if a mage survives long enough, eventually they can start to summon really good things. It's not a crux of your strategy as Middle Age Relay, it's just a fun thing you can do, and I think you have to do it for the memes, if nothing else. If you're not using the Void Gate, you're not being a good illithid. You're not doing it right. Then you have your cap only. And cap only is awesome. Costs 4 research points, 290 gold, so only 90 gold more, but you get 3 additional guaranteed passes, 2 of them stacked on Astral. So straight out of the box, recruitable Astral 3. Randoms. 200% chances, 110% chance. Always Water, Earth, Astral, Death. So you can get D2 off these guys. You can get Astral 5 off these guys, and this is not even counting the 10%. With the 10%, you can technically get Astral 6, which is just ludicrous. You can get Earth 2, you can get Water 2, but you'll be waiting a long time for those combinations. Especially since they take 2 turns to recruit. But it does put a premium on, once you have the money and other forts going up, all your capital should be recruiting as these guys, because they're the crux of your Death access, your Earth access, your significant Water access, and they're your big centerpiece Astral casters. They can all teleport. So many of them can mind hunt effectively. They can do so many things. These are useful, stack them up. They are not sacred, so you're going to pay through the wazoo, through 232 gold a year. So 23 gold a turn. Thereabouts, a little less because there are 12 months in a year anyway. But they're bloody useful. And at nearly 1400 years old, it's time for them to finally do something useful for Relay. So I would recruit these Starspawn out the wazoo. Just make sure you don't accidentally click on these guys. Click on the guys with the extension at the back of the head. It makes them smarter. And then you have hybrid commanders. These are coastal recruits. they're alright. 60 leadership, 10 magic leadership, so you can have 10 mind blasters behind an infantry line that can actually form line. And they're also a mind blaster that costs nothing more than the ordinary Illithid. So, yeah, and you can recruit 2 in a fort, so they're kind of handy. For leading forces on land, I think this is kind of a good idea. Heck, for leading forces underwater, probably the right idea. Although their iron equipment does rust underwater. What's this package give you? So this package gives you the ability to form some pretty serious communions with some major centerpiece casters. So, what are our armies going to look like? What are our scales going to look like? Our armies in the early game are going to be either Meteorite Guards supported by Lobo Guard and Mind Blasters, or it's going to be all squishy troops supported by, again, Mind Blasters. In the mid-game, you're going to transition away from Mind Blasters because they're bloody expensive, transitioning towards a communion-based mage approach supported by Assassins and Ritual Magic. What does that look like? Well, communions can be built up, astral communions can be built very easily as relay, and you can support it with a range of elemental magic. So you can support it with water, with earth, with nature from sorcery, and you have death access in your big star spawn, and your little star spawn actually too. So these guys can random a little bit of death and get it in there if you don't care about fatigue. So you have access to a wide range of casting abilities which allow you to buff your armies, but also just blow the shit out of your opponents. So Astral gives you some really good buffs. Eventually you'll have access to things like Will of the Fates, which is an amazing buff. But you'll also have access to a range of Astral evocations and counters to various things. You can support those armies and that casting with Star Child Assassin shenanigans. And Star Children, especially once you have items, don't need much gearing in order to be very effective assassins against most enemy targets, and they can drive people absolutely freaking mental, which is amazing. It's a great thing to have in a unit, and at 85 gold per, they are eminently replaceable. So as relay, I'm seeing lots of value mages, which means I probably want lots of forts. Probably not early forts, because you need gold in the early game for Mind Blasters to make your armies work at all. However, once you can get there, you want lots and lots of forts to recruit, lots and lots of... You want Star Children, you want Slave Mages, you want everything in large numbers and quantities all of the time. Being that Communion Nation, you have access to a huge array of spells, so it's hard to go through them exhaustively, but we'll go through a couple. The presence of the Centerpiece Star Spawn with the Astral 3 abilities and the ability to go Astral even higher means that if there are globals in Astral that you want to cast, you'll be able to get there, so you can plan around it. You also are going to be a really effective Mind Hunter. You can do Mind Hunting 2 ways. You can do it Commander expensive item cheap, or you can do it item expensive mage cheap. So you can get something as simple as a Star Child. Stick a coin, which you can make with the right combination of paths on your recruitable cap only. Coin and a cap will make these guys Astral 3. And then throw a Eye of the Void and a Rune Smasher on them for +4 pen, and put a Shroud on them. And all of a sudden, depending on what you're... If you take, say, a Recuperation Bless, you can mind hurt them, or you can just accept that you're going to lose people. At that point, you've invested a lot of gems in gear, but you can take the gear off if they get feeble-minded, and you can throw Mind Hunts out with a 85 gold mage. Alternatively, Mind Hunt out of the box with your capital-only Star Spawn, but you're risking powerful Mage Eye to do it. However, you'll get bonus Astral Paths, and you don't need any items to make it work. It just works. So you have 2 Mind Hunt openings, you have an Assassin. All of this means that enemies have to take proper countermeasures in order to avoid being drowned in a pool of their own blood before they even get to the battlefield, which I think is great. The side effect of this, though, is that you want lots and lots of research. So you're really going to be glad that you have both efficient researchers and fast researchers. But because you're pumping out a lot of commanders during expansion, because you're probably going to be slow with your first fort because of your expensive units, and mages, I suppose, you're going to feel the lack of research early, and then you're going to boom really, really well. So you want heaps of research, and there's stuff for relay in all of the research paths. Conjuration's a classic. I think if you're fighting someone underwater, you have to go Conjuration or you die. Conjuration level 3 gets you the lesser elementals, Conjuration 5 gets you the large elementals, and large water elementals are kings of underwater combat, and nothing comes close to them in the early or early mid game. So, Conjuration useful. Conjuration also gives you Voice of Tiamat, which lets you turn all of your water gems into site searches on all of your water provinces, and gives you the fantastic ability to pick up a bunch of air income and fire income, because it searches for all elemental paths. So you can pick up fire, earth, air. You could have searched for water, but you'll pick up those elemental paths you couldn't easily search for and get a diverse gem income, which as you break into additional paths will be very useful. Conjuration also enables you to break into said other paths. So, contacting Naiads, for example, gives you a Nature 3, Water 3, so access to Nature 3, using, basically, you can use that with a Slave Mage off the bat. Naiad Warriors are also useful, but there you are, Contact Naiad. And Contact Naiad is doable with... yeah, an out-of-the-box proper random... a nature randomed Slave Mage with a Water Bracelet or a Robe of the Sea, so low-level construction items, and combined with Conj 5, breaks you into serious nature, which I think is really, really good. At Conjuration 6, if you choose to go further... where is Stream of Hades? There it is, Stream of Hades. So yeah, this requires 2 water boosters and a death random. So we need water 4, death 1. I think we can do that. Yeah, we absolutely can. So a water random star spawn. So one, if any of his things roll water 1, and then you throw the water boosters on, and he's got death 1, you're good to go. You're good to go, and you can break into having water 3, death 3. And death 3 is handy. Death 3 is handy, especially if you then use a crystal matrix and add the Cocythiad into your force. But you're like, okay, cool, Conjuration. So Conjuration, definite if you're facing, say, Pelagia or someone in the water and you want to survive and not die and your diplomacy's not up there. And even if your diplomacy's up there, if they discover you didn't go Conjuration, you're probably dead. I go Conjuration even when I'm not under threat, because being able to throw water elementals at people encourages them not to come into my lake. So Conjuration's a good early pick. The problem is, just about everything is a good pick as well. Construction gives you access to a whole bunch of those things I mentioned before, and it also really makes your mind hunts and your assassins possible. Assassination without construction is difficult and inefficient, considering that you pay 2 command points for your assassins. Construction is good. Getting to Construction 6 unlocks a lot of flexibility for you. And Construction 4 is good in and of itself, but Construction 6 really brings you into your own, with boosters to access everything you could need, as well as research items if you have taken paths to have access to them, as well as pen items, mine hunting items, boosters, all the good stuff. So, Construction is competitive. And you're like, oh, well, what about the others? Well, they're all kind of useful. You need Thaumaturgy at minimum to get to an early level just so you can communion at all. And then at level 3 you have the ability to teleport. Also, Thaumaturgy is the path that gives you access to Mind Burn and Soul Slay, which are the things that make Mind Hunt in Evocation actually do anything. Mind Burn is a staple of the early game if you want to build small communions, and Mind Burn, you can do that really effectively using 85 gold mages. Teleport gives your major mages flexibility. You're going to have access to things at... where am I looking? Because you have nature access in communions, you can have access to any of these nature spells as well, which is kind of cool. Gift of Reason, probably not important until later in the game, and you're probably going to be using Naiads to do that anyway. Gateway, useful, and Soul Slay. All of this is really secondary to the fact you get Soul Slay at level 5, which is what turns Mine Hunt from an annoyance into a killer, like a reliable killer. So Thaumaturgy 5 is going to be on your list eventually. Past that, you're probably not going to go higher from... There's not really much reason to go higher until you're ready to go all the way to, like, say, 7 to pick up some major global enchantments like Vengeful Water, which can be a great defensive spell. Dark Spires can be great if you've got air on your Pretender. And obviously going all the way to 8 gets you Gale Gate if you have air. You probably won't. I'd pass on Lure of the Deep. I'm not seeing much in the higher levels. And then all of a sudden you see Master Enslave. The reason I was sort of meandering through those, it was kind of like, this is all sort of dead territory. There's not a huge amount here from 6, 7, 8, but you get Master and Slave. And Relay is just so good at Master and Slave. Now, it's Astral Gem expensive, because what you want to do in this case is teleport a bunch of Communion Slaves and a Communion Master onto your opponent at once, maybe 3 Masters, and then just go Communion, bang, with a bunch of pen items, and then the entire enemy army kills it. And that's how you slaughter Doom stacks. Costs you a bunch of gems, risks a bunch of mages, but it's hard to counter, it's hard to deal with, unless your enemy is ready and prepared for it. So, Master and Slave, fun late game trick, definitely not an early research goal. So yeah, Thaumaturgy you need in order to give Mind Hunt its power. But you need Evocation to get Mind Hunt. So how far down Evocation do we need to go in order to get Mind Hunt? There it is. Evocation 6. You need to go to Evocation 6 to unlock one of your big national tricks, which is the Mind Hunt. Along the way, you'll pick up a whole bunch of stuff, and for that reason I don't consider Evocation a waste on Relay. Because you have Elemental Communion access, you can throw a lot of these spells if it calls for them. You're not as good as a specialized power, so you're not as good at throwing, say, Gifts from Heaven as a specialized power, but you can do it. You can cast Earthquakes. You can throw Shadow Blasts. If you find an opponent who has a particular weakness, Relay can do it. Not super efficiently, but they can do it. And that's handy to have in your pocket. And then at level 6, you unlock Mind Hunt. As a side effect, you also pick up a couple of other useful spells along the way. Having Cleansing Water is handy if you're fighting Urmor. And spoiler again, preview. Urmor is in the Middle Age game. The zombie apocalypse is present and accounted for. So maybe Cleansing Water is the way to go eventually. And then other spells are just good. Notably, if you go to Evocation 7, Relay with the right randoms can in Communions cast Stygian Rain. They're not as good at doing it as, say, Late Age Atlantis, but Stygian Rain is possible for them. And when you have heavily armoured magic weapon troops, it's worth considering. However, you've got so much competition for your research, I don't think Evocation 7 is going to be on your list for a while. Alright, God. Okay, so apparently we need Conjuration, we need Construction, we need Evocation, we need Thaumaturgy. At least tell me that there's nothing useful for us in Alteration or Enchantment. You'd be wrong. Alteration is generically useful. You get access to Swarm. You get access to a whole bunch of buff spells, which you can absolutely access through your Communion. You get the ability to... where is it? There it is. Okay. At Alteration 6 is the real payoff as far as I'm concerned. Alteration 6 gives you access to Darkness. All your troops have major or complete dark vision. So Darkness works great for you. So if you can make your way to Alteration 6, you have a battle-winning spell for conventional conflicts. You combo that up with some spells that are useful for light thugging, and you're pretty good to go. You also get things like Frozen Heart for killing thugs along the way. It's just good. And if you go to 7, you get Mass Protection, which you can totally cast. So you can combo Darkness and Mass Protection. And you don't have air access, otherwise I'd say add Fog Warriors. But you can counter people with Fog Warriors because if you're production Relay, you'll have magic weapons on your front line. Plus, you're really good at throwing evocations. So you get access to Mass Protection and Darkness, which makes your relatively average slave army suddenly really, really competitive and dangerous. So Alteration absolutely has some appeal to it. Okay. At least tell me, you say, that there's nothing in Enchantment that I want as Relay. The answer is you probably want Enchantment eventually too. You want anti-magic for a number of things. Twice spawning your major mages can be useful. You can cast Foul Vapors later on and then combine it with Serpent's Blessing. You're just not very good at it. And you're seeing the theme here. The theme is because I have multiple path access in Communions, I can do anything as Relay. You get access to some good astral rituals, but I wouldn't cast Eyes of God because people will just Fate of Oedipus you, no matter how many gems you put in. But then eventually you get all this good stuff down here. Eventually you get relief, you'll get the hidden spells, which will allow you to diversify your magic even more. It's probably not the strongest, and I would say stay away from it if you have to stay away from something. Enchantment's not my first step, but it's bloody useful. And it also means that if you get all the way to Enchantment 9, you've got a decent chance of casting Arcane Nexus, which is, I think, a game-winning spell if you can keep it up. You need 3, 6, 7, 8 Astral to cast it. Now, hypothetically, you can recruit a mage that will cast that. Hypothetically, a Starspawn with... you can recruit an Astral 6, which only needs 2 boosters, the cap and the coin. More likely, you'll recruit an Astral 5 and throw coin, ring, cap on, and you can cast Arcane Nexus with a recruitable bloody mage. That's legit, that's fair. And Arcane Nexus, if you can then keep it up, wins the game for you, because it's lots and lots of pearls, and you're super effective at using pearls. So Enchantment has low payoff, but once you get into the end game, you can make a run for Enchantment 9. The only thing you don't need is blood. You have no blood access. You need everything. So let me take that back. You don't need everything. You can benefit from anything and everything. So it's hard for enemies to predict what you'll go for first, and I think you have to be flexible. I think an early Conjuration opening is solid. I think an early Conjuration opening protects you underwater and dominates your hold of the sea. I think it also is the path by which you gain access to additional magic paths when comboed with Construction. There's late game summons. Some of them you'll have access to, some of them you won't. It's up to you whether or not you think they're worth making a serious run for. If you're going that way, I would reserve that for if you have a specific plan. But going to like Conjuration 5 or 6, with 5 being the critical point, I would go to at least 5 and then break into something else. Gives you a lot of combat power early. There's a version of Relay which plays all the way to Conjuration 9, but it's not the focus of this video. So I think Conjuration's a strong fit. I think supporting Construction is helpful. It gives you... It's basically the unlock for your assassination techniques, and it gives you a lot of critical boosts and elements that you can use to support yourself. From there, you need to pick some combat paths. You need to decide, am I going to be unlocking the Mind Hunt combo? So am I needing to go Evocation Thalm, and if so, in what order? I would probably pick up the Soul Slay first and then pick up the Mind Hunt. That's probably where the better rate of return is. Or you can go down the buff path, Alteration, and take Alteration to level 6 and unlock Darkness. So either you can become a major battlefield power by going Alt after you've picked up some Conj and Const, or you can make yourself even more cancerous by going Thalm Evo. I wouldn't go Ench first. Late game, lots of targets. Arcane Nexus is an obvious target. Major Globals are obvious targets. Take it from there. So what do you want from a god? I would say that Relay is a really, really powerful nation with lots of awesome recruitables. And as a result, all else being equal in a world where you controlled everything and there were no opponents, I say you want Scales. I say you want probably Dormant, maybe Imprisoned, and then you need to pick, am I picking Sloth Relay or am I picking Production Relay? Am I picking Meteorite Guard Relay or Sloth Relay? They're entirely different. They unlock very, very different capabilities. So the option to go Dormant or Imprisoned Scales is always there. Bless is not important on Relay because nothing is sacred. Now, you can do some shenanigans if you're going to be building lots of shrouds. You can go, for example, Recuperation, Magic Penetration. Put those on your Mind Hunters to make your Mind Hunters more effective and mean eventually they'll heal off their feeble-mindedness and they'll become useful again. Not quickly, but they'll eventually do it. So that's one thing you can do. But you're not really playing for Bless here. The other option is, at the other end of the spectrum, is, and I think this comes down to what the politics and setup of your game is, you can go for an Awake Expander, or a Dormant Super Combatant. Why would you do this? If you're facing someone like Pelagia, or even Atlantis, if you're going to have a serious fight for the water, then picking up an Awake Expander might be handy. You have lots of options as Relay. We'll have a look at those in a moment, that make good underwater super combatants. It means you're sacrificing some of what makes your nation special by giving away your scales, but an Awake super combatant can tilt the scales if, for example, the Pelagia has been greedy and gone dormant or imprisoned, then maybe executing a counter rush with your Awake Expander and a couple of Mind Blasters and a horde of Lobos to crack forts might work. It also is a way, depending on which sort of one you take. So if you take the Worm, you get a way to get on land quickly and stake out a claim before you're completely constrained to the ocean. How do you lose as Relay, and how do you win as Relay? I think this is how I want to close this out, because this is the strategic question behind the nation. I think Relays lose. There's 2 lose conditions. Either you're rushed down by another water nation, which is better underwater than you, looking at you, Pelagia, or there's no other real water nations in the game, or you're not near the one that's in the game. You secure your lake, and then you're stuck. And Relays sort of become doomed to this situation whereby they can't win because they're sort of stuck in the water. They don't have enough land, they're not income, they're not relevant enough. But they can't win the game, but they can make life really hard for other people and prevent them winning. And that's the sort of Relay that I think most people hate. So the trick to Relay is you have to get on land somewhere early so you can stake out a beachhead and then expand that at some point and have a good strategy as to how to expand that. Because without going on land, you can't win Dominions. Most thrones will be on land. You cannot win Dominions as Relay without taking significant land holdings. So have a strategy to do it. Those are the 2 ways to lose as Relay. The only way to win as Relay is either build up a sort of a full head of steam and steamroll people in the mid and late game when your tools come online from your water base, or rush someone down early and go from there. I think that one of the great tools Relay has is because you have the Mind Hunt, Assassin, and the Underwater Homeland all working for you, you're a pain to invade, and because you're a pain to invade, you've got some more freedom with your diplomatic operations. You can convince people to work with you, and you won't have competing interests until it's time for you to go on land in a big way. Usually, it makes sense for people to accept you having little toeholds on land in exchange for your assistance because fighting you is such a goddamn pain. So leverage that, use that, be aware of who you are, embrace the insanity, and accept the fact that you're playing a strong nation that if it can secure its underwater homeland and a little bit of presence on land, you become incredibly difficult to dislodge, and at that point you can unlock your good research, your remote attack capability, your assassin capability, your late game rituals, your summonables, your conjurables, and your really strong line troops. That's a long list of benefits to eventually roll your opposition. So I'm excited to play Middle Age Relay. It's not exactly a challenge. It's not the most challenging nation to play because you have so many tools, but hopefully by playing it, we're going to demonstrate a couple of useful things, and we'll share more of those thoughts as the game progresses. So that's it for now. That's my guide on Middle Age Relay. Happy to take additional comments or thoughts, and we'll discuss those during the game itself. Cheers.